So today we're going to be building a Moxon vise. This one's a little bit different. We're going to mount it upside down and to the bottom of the workbench. So let's get into the build. Hey, my name is Joe. Welcome to Shepherd's Workbench. So we're going to start by breaking down our rough stock. This is hard maple. We're going to run it through the jointer to get one square edge, then take it to the table saw and rip it to its final width. Once we've done that, we're going to take it to our crosscut sled and square up both sides of it. One helpful shop tip, I always keep a jar of various coins in my shop just so I can mark out all of my round overs or the rounded corners on pieces. In this case, we're using a $50 for our round corners. Then we're going to round that corner over on the belt sander just to get a nice clean edge that's going to be touched. I'm going to cut a chunk out of the corners with my pole saw, and then we're going to mark and drill our holes for the threaded rod. And if you want a good way to burn out a brand new Forstner bit, hard maple on a bad drill press is the way to do it. All right, so you saw me drill those holes. So I cut my little slots in here off camera. And by off camera, I mean I forgot to press record. So we have slots in there like that. That way, like it can, when you're looking at it from the top, it can rack back and forth if there's an odd shaped piece. So we've got our back piece. So this was interesting. So I cut majority of this out with my pole saw. And then I tried to cut this curve with my coping saw because I don't have a bandsaw. About 30 minutes into that, I decided this is dumb. So I called my buddy who does have a bandsaw and I said, hey, friend, can I come over? And he let me come over. So I finished these off on the bandsaw and I almost broke his bandsaw. You can see this is super hard maple. So what we're going to do is we got majority of it out. I got the rough idea of the curve, and we're going to refine that curve on the belt sander.
Oh yeah, we'll just sand down the line. It's so easy. All the other YouTubers do it. You know what would come in handy right now? A vise.
So I'm about to get real honest with you guys because I can't hide this. So sanding was taking forever, if you didn't notice. And I decided, what's the best way I could get around this? Freehand routing. This side turned out pretty good. I was happy with that. See anything wrong? Bit got away from me. Just a bit. So, needless to say, this vise is not going to be perfect. But we're going to keep making it anyway. So, there's that. Normally, for a Moxon vise, it could clamp to your bench by these two tabs. I don't want to do that. This will be mounted to the underside of my bench. And this will be our jaw. Now, I know what you're thinking. Joe, your front jaw is a lot taller than your back jaw. You know why that is? Because I have a bench that's that thick. So, yeah. The front face is going to be covered with leather anyway, so what we're going to do next is attempt to chisel through some really hard maple and some chisels that are in need of sharpening. We're going to chisel out this spot for our nut to sit in. We'll epoxy that in there, so then that way the threaded rod will go back and forth, which, by the way, we're using 3/4 threaded rod. I love the T-track on this bench. I'm so glad I added it. Thought it was going to be really expensive, but I got almost all of this T-track for like $50. One day there'll be an overview of my assembly table. Maybe next week. We'll figure it out. All right, we're done. It doesn't have to be flush. That's good enough for me. Now I have to do the other side. Oh, great. Only another half an hour and forever to go.
I like to use this little trick where you put some blue painter's tape and mix your epoxy. Make sure you get it inside the groove and on the nut being in there. I then added the threaded rod to the nut to make sure it was square to the front face.
So, my phone died. I mean, my camera. Anyway, what you missed was the epoxy's in. It's not pretty, but it'll work. If it doesn't work, we'll make it work. But what you also missed was I took my 32-inch, 36-inch, 3/4-inch threaded rod and cut it in half using my angle grinder. Make sure you put a nut on the end of it before you cut it so you can recut your threads. So next, we're going to work on the handles. I cut out these 2 blanks of maple to whatever random size. Then we're going to cut out with a hole saw, cut through these to make a round figure that's going to be much bigger than this nut. So probably use a 2-inch hole saw or something. I don't know. And then we will cut out a 1-inch hole in the middle, chisel out, these is 2 blocks taped together, to inset these nuts, and then stop it. Then we'll cut out other pieces to be our handle that are going to be a little bit bigger. So let's do it.
So far, we've ruined Forstner bits. Now let's try to ruin this hole saw. Again, in this hard maple, it's rough. Be prepared. You need sharp bits to get this hole cut. So after we did it with the hole saw, we're going to take our 1-inch Forstner bit with the hole saw pin that marked the exact center and cut it out with a Forstner bit.
All right, so we got the bottom, or the base mounted to the bottom of the bench. The top, slots on there, just like that. And yes, I didn't record it because didn't think you needed it. All I did was drive screws in these little tabs here. And then once I got it up there, I turned the 3/4-inch rod all the way till it met the inside part of this bench here. Then I drilled some holes. Let's look closer. You can see how tight that is. So once I got the threaded rod all the way in there, I got it touching the bench. Then I traced with my pencil around where the threaded rod was, unscrewed this from the bench, pulled it off, drilled a 1-inch hole to accommodate the 3/4-inch rod. I don't really need it to be super tight in the bench because the workbench has the vise has the nuts in the back, so it won't move and doesn't really need the extra support. So then what I did is once I got it, I permanently mounted it to the bench. I also drove 2 2-inch screws from the top of my bench to support the middle here. And I did that because normally a Moxon vise sits on top of your bench and then it gets clamped down. But I wanted something that mounted underneath that fit flush, and I didn't want to buy a really expensive flush mount vise for it. So I thought, we'll just put the Moxon vise upside down. that's why I screwed 2 screws in the middle here to support this 15-inch span with that hard maple underneath. So I didn't want all the weight to be on these little tabs and potentially break them off later. And I have no desire to glue it for the simple fact of if it breaks, I want to be able to take it off later. All right, so we pulled our little wooden washer things out. And yes, while chiseling it out, they cracked. Was I gonna make another one? No. So I just epoxied the heck out of it, slapped them together. And here's why I'm not super worried about the crack. Because there's gonna be a plate that's gonna go on the back of this. That's really gonna hold it well. And this part will actually be our handle. So we're never gonna touch this part. It's literally just to hold the nut against this thing, or against the handle, without having to chisel out another mortise that only goes halfway through and mess with all of that stuff, because that creates more cracking. Because there's going to be a lot of torsion on this, or a lot of torque on this, trying to get those, or getting the threaded rods clamping. So I wanted to make sure it was 2 separate pieces, so in case it did break, there were parts that were salvageable. All right, so I need to somehow get this round circle without a lathe. So I saw on YouTube, Fischer shop made a hole, or a way to make circles on a table saw. So I didn't want to make the whole jig. So I put a nail in my crosscut sled. The distance from the outside of the circle to this center point. And I just used a regular pencil compass. So I put my nail in. I pre-drilled here. So this just fits over the nail. And then you slowly work the table saw blade, spinning the piece until you get majority of it off. Then you can spin it like that, and it makes a perfect circle. And I've got both my pieces glued together with some blue painter's tape and CA glue in between. So it holds them together well enough, and then when I want to pry them apart, they come apart real easy.
I'll have a link in the description down below if you want to make the circle cutting jig that Fischer shop made. This was just kind of an impromptu thing. I very rarely cut perfect circles like this, so I didn't want to make the full jig.
Okay, so what I did is I drilled a 3/4 inch drill bit on either side. I only went probably about 1/4 inch deep, just so that when I glue these on to the front face, I can align a threaded rod there, then that way they stay perfectly center. So next, router. We're gonna round over all of these edges and just make them nice and smooth.
I'm going to apologize here. I did not have the good camera angle in order to see me put them on the actual threaded rod, but you'll see here in a second. I'll show you. I just made sure to put wood glue on the actual wood parts that were going to be together and make sure that it was tight to the threaded rod, and then I clamped both of those pieces together.
That was stressful, but here we are. Clamped up, pressed in, glue squeezing out. Looking pretty good.
So this is an oil finish that I like on my shop furniture especially. It's 1-to-1 part ratio of wipe-on poly and boiled linseed oil. It gives a good color to it, and it matches the top of the bench. With that, we are all done. We finally got this thing set up and dialed in. The handles turned out really great. Later on, I ended up adding a 1/4 inch square metal stock to the front of the handles so I can attach my drill to push them in and out. It's okay. I might end up having to take them off later, but it turned out pretty great, and I really love it.
Well, there she is, all done up and fancy. Off camera, I ended up chamfering this just because I didn't like the look of the block. And then I also took some spray adhesive and I glued some leather inside the jaws face. You can kind of see it right here. Just so in that way, if I get any pieces in there, it's not going to mar it up by the hard maple, because it ruined almost all of my drill bits. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the build. If you like this stuff, if you like these kind of projects, like and subscribe for future videos, and we'll see you on the next project. Bye, guys.